Commander Jake Morrison stood at the viewing port of the Terra Nova, watching the massive alien space station grow larger as they approached. The station looked like a giant metal spider floating in the darkness of space. Its 8 arms stretched out in all directions, each one bigger than Earth's largest city. Strange purple lights flickered along its surface, casting an eerie glow across the black void. Jake had been in space for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. First contact with an alien species. The Terra Nova was humanity's newest exploration ship, built specifically for this mission. Behind him, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, their faces showing the same mix of excitement and fear that Jake felt in his chest. "Commander, we're receiving a docking signal," reported Lieutenant Amy Johnson from her position at the communications console. She was young, maybe 25, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "They're directing us to docking bay 7. Jake nodded. "Take us in slowly, pilot. Let's not make any sudden moves." The Terra Nova moved through the docking bay doors, which closed behind them with a deep rumble that shook the ship. Jake could see alien workers moving around outside, but they were too far away to make out details. What he could see was that they were big, much bigger than humans. "All stop," Jake ordered. "Prepare the diplomatic team." 20 minutes later, Jake walked through the airlock into the space station. The gravity felt heavier than Earth normal, and the air had a strange metallic taste. The corridor was huge, built for beings much larger than humans. The walls were covered in what looked like claw marks. Carved deep into the metal, behind Jake walked Lisa Carter, Earth's best diplomat. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but Jake knew she had negotiated peace treaties in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. Next to her was Captain Ben Taylor, a military observer who kept his hand near his sidearm. Finally, there was Dr. Helen Carter, scientist who studied alien biology and culture. The alien escort led them through twisting corridors. Jake noticed that there were no windows, no plants, no artwork, just endless metal walls covered in scratches and dents. The whole place felt cold and hostile. They entered a massive chamber with a ceiling so high that Jake couldn't see the top. In the center of the room stood the largest creature Jake had ever seen. It was at least 9 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. Its head was long and narrow, like a crocodile's, but it walked upright on 2 powerful legs. Its arms ended in hands with razor-sharp claws that could easily tear through metal. "I am Supreme Hunter Vexthal," the creature said in perfect English. Its voice was deep and rough, like grinding stone. "Leader of the Krolix Empire. You are the humans." Lisa stepped forward with a diplomatic smile. "Yes, we are honored to meet you. I am Lisa Carter, speaking for the United Earth government. Come in peace, hoping to establish friendly relations between our peoples." Vexthal's lips pulled back, showing rows of sharp teeth. It might have been a smile, but it looked more like a threat. "Peaceful? Yes, you look peaceful. Weak, soft, like prey." The alien leader moved to a metal chair that sat near the center of the room. Without warning, he grabbed it with both hands and tore it apart like it was made of paper. The sound of rending metal echoed through the chamber. Pieces of the chair scattered across the floor. "This is Krolix's strength," Vexthal said, dropping the twisted remains. "We have ruled this sector of space for 3,000 years. We've conquered 17 species, all stronger than you." Jake felt his heart racing, but he kept his face calm. Next to him, Captain Taylor's hand moved slightly closer to his weapon. Dr. Carter was quietly recording everything with a small device. "Impressive," Lisa said, her voice steady. "But we believe that strength comes in many forms. Perhaps we could discuss how our species might work together." Vexthal laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. "Work together? You misunderstand? We do not work with prey. We hunt prey. We eat prey. We keep some prey as livestock, if they are useful." 3 more Krolix entered the chamber. They were smaller than Vexthal, but still massive compared to the humans. Each wore what looked like armor made from the bones of other creatures. Their claws gleamed in the purple light. "These are my warpack leaders," Vexel said. "They have seen many hunts. They agree that humans would make good livestock. You breed quickly, yes? You're not too difficult to keep in cages?" Lisa's smile never wavered, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. "We appreciate your interest, but humans prefer to remain free. We have much to offer as partners and allies." "Partners?" Vexel moved closer, his massive form looming over the small human delegation. "You have no claws, no fangs, no armor. Your skin is soft. You are slow. What could you possibly offer to apex predators?" Dr. Carter spoke for the first time, her voice calm and scientific. "We offer knowledge, technology, art, culture, the ability to solve problems through cooperation instead of violence." One of the warpack leaders hissed something in the Krolix language. Vexel nodded and turned back to the humans. "My subordinate reminds me that we have heard such words before. From the Zephyrians, from the Taldari, from the Corvin. All spoke of cooperation. All now serve as livestock or fertilizer." Jake stepped forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" Vexel's eyes glowed with satisfaction. "Simple. You have 3 standard galactic cycles to surrender your worlds. Submit to Krolix's rule. Accept your place as livestock. Some of you will be kept alive to serve us. The rest will feed us." "And if we refuse?" Captain Taylor asked. "Then we will take your worlds by force. We will hunt every human until none remain. Your species will become extinct, remembered only as another failed prey animal that thought it could challenge the Krolix." The chamber fell silent except for the distant humming of the station's machinery. Jake could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just first contact. This was a death sentence for all of humanity. Lisa cleared her throat. "We will need to discuss this with our government." 3 cycles, you said?" 3 cycles, Vexel confirmed. "More than enough time for prey to accept reality." Dr. Carter had been quietly studying the aliens throughout the conversation. Jake noticed that she was using her recording device to scan not just their voices, but their movements, their breathing patterns, even the way they reacted to different words. "We understand," Lisa said. "We will return to Earth and present your offer to our leaders." Vexel laughed again. "Offer?
Ow!
This is not an offer. This is the natural order. The strong devour the weak. The hunters consume the prey. It has always been this way." As the humans were escorted back to their ship, Jake noticed something that the Krolix had missed. Amy Johnson, their communications officer, had been quietly recording everything. It's not just the conversation, but the technology around them, the way the aliens moved, the materials their equipment was made from, the frequency of their communications. Back on the Terra Nova, as they prepared to leave the station, Jake gathered his team in the briefing room. "Well," he said, "that went about as badly as possible." Lisa nodded grimly. "They're not interested in diplomacy. They see us as nothing more than animals to be domesticated or slaughtered." Captain Taylor leaned forward. "What's our next move?" Dr. Carter looked up from her data pad. "We learn everything we can about them. Their biology, their psychology, their technology, their weaknesses." "Weaknesses?" Jake asked. "Did you see any?" Dr. Carter smiled for the first time since the meeting. "Oh, yes. They have one very big weakness. They think they're perfect. They think they're unbeatable. They've been apex predators for so long that they've forgotten what it means to be prey." Amy Johnson spoke up from her station. "I've been analyzing their communications. Their technology is impressive, but it's old. They haven't innovated in centuries. They don't need to, because they've never faced real opposition." Spark of hope. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Dr. Carter replied, "that they're about to learn something about humans that they don't expect. We may not have claws or fangs, but we have something they've never encountered before. What's that? We never stop learning, never stop adapting, and we never ever give up." As the Terra Nova pulled away from the alien station, Jake looked back at the massive structure. 3 cycles to save humanity. It seemed impossible, but he was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, The Krolix had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated their prey. 6 months had passed since the meeting at the alien station. Krolix Empire had given humanity 3 cycles to surrender, and now the deadline was almost here. On the colony world of New Montana, Sheriff Dan Rodriguez stood on the porch of his office watching the morning sun rise over the wheat fields. The planet looked peaceful, but Don knew that peace was about to end. New Montana was home to 50,000 humans. Most were farmers, miners, and their families. The planet had been settled only 10 years ago, and the colonists had worked hard to build their new home. The main town, called Liberty, sat in a valley surrounded by rolling hills. Beyond the town, farms stretched out in all directions, their golden crops swaying in the gentle breeze. Dan had been sheriff for 5 years. He was a big man with rough hands and a kind face. Before coming to New Montana, he had been a police officer on Earth. He thought his days of fighting were over, but he was wrong. The communication device on his belt crackled to life. "Dan, this is Kate. You need to get to the communication center right away." Kate Phillips was the chief engineer for the colony. She was smart, tough, and had been working day and night to prepare for what everyone knew was coming. Don walked quickly through the town center, past the school where children were playing, past the market where people were buying food for their families. Everything looked normal, but Dan could see the fear in people's eyes. The communication center was a small building next to the town hall. Inside, Kate was staring at a screen filled with flashing red lights. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her work clothes were stained with grease. "They're coming," she said without looking up. 3 ships. Big ones. They'll be here in 4 hours. Dan felt his stomach drop. "How big?" "Each ship is about 2 miles long. Our scanners show they're carrying thousands of soldiers and heavy weapons." Kate turned to face him. "Oh, Dan, we're not going to win this fight with normal weapons?" Dan nodded. For months, the colonists had been preparing for this day. They had turned their peaceful farming community into a fortress. Every building had been reinforced. Every colonist had been trained to fight. Hidden weapons and supplies were stored throughout the town and surrounding areas. "Send the signal," Dan said. "Tell everyone it's time." Kate pressed a button, and a low tone sounded. Throughout the colony, it was the signal they had all been waiting for. Within minutes, the streets were empty. Children and elderly people moved to the underground shelters that had been built beneath the town. Adult colonists took their positions at defensive points. Dan walked to the town square, where a group of armed colonists was waiting. Among them was Peter Wong, barely 18 years old. Peter had arrived on New Montana with his parents 2 years ago. He was small for his age, with black hair and quick hands that were good at fixing machines. "You sure about this, Peter?" Dan asked. "You could go to the shelters with the others." Peter shook his head. "This is my home too, not hiding while others fight." Don looked at the young man and felt proud. Peter represented everything good about humanity. He was brave, loyal, and willing to fight for what he believed in. 4 hours later, the Krolix ships appeared in the sky. They were massive, dark shapes that blocked out the sun. The ships looked like giant metal insects, with long sections that could separate and attack different targets. Purple energy weapons glowed along their hulls. The lead ship landed in the field outside Liberty. The ground shook as the huge vessel touched down, crushing the wheat beneath its weight. A ramp lowered, and alien soldiers began marching out. They were even bigger than the ones the human diplomats had met. These were warriors bred for battle. Their scales were darker, their claws sharper, their eyes filled with hunger. Warpack Alpha Zeekmer led the assault force. He was 8 feet tall, with scars covering his arms and face. Each scar told the story of another species he had helped conquer. He had expected to find humans cowering in their homes, begging for mercy. Instead, he found empty streets and silence. "Spread out," Zeekmer commanded his soldiers. "Find the prey. Bring me their leaders." The Krolix soldiers moved through the town in hunting packs, just as they had on dozens of other worlds. They kicked down doors, searched buildings, and grew more confused with each empty house they found. Where were the humans? Where were the tears and screams they expected? The first shot came from the clock tower in the town center. A human sniper had been waiting there, hidden and patient. The energy bolt struck a Krolix soldier in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The alien didn't die immediately, but he was badly wounded. Zeekmer roared in anger. Return fire, destroy that building. The Krolix raised their weapons and began shooting at the clock tower. Purple energy beams tore through the old brick structure, causing it to crumble. But the human sniper was already gone, having moved to a different position. More shots rang out from different buildings. The humans were using hit-and-run tactics, firing a few shots and then disappearing. The Krolix used a direct confrontation. Didn't know how to respond to this kind of fighting. In the underground tunnels beneath the town, Kate Phillips was coordinating the defense. She had turned the colony's communication system into a military network. Every human fighter had a small radio that connected them to the central command. Team 3, the aliens are moving toward the school. Kate's voice crackled through the radio. Team 7, you're clear to move to position beta. The humans moved through the tunnels like ghosts. They knew every inch of their town, every hiding place, every escape route. The Krolix were strong and well-armed. But they were fighting on human ground now. Above ground, Zeekmer was growing frustrated. His soldiers were being picked off one by one, and he couldn't even see the enemy. The humans were using their knowledge of the terrain to stay hidden while striking at will. Enough, Zeekmer bellowed. Bring up the heavy weapons. We'll destroy this entire settlement. A massive vehicle rolled off one of the Krolix ships. It was a walker standing 30 feet tall on 4 mechanical legs. Its main weapon was a cannon that could level entire buildings. The machine looked unstoppable as it moved toward the town center. That's when Peter Wong made his move. The young man had been hiding in a drainage pipe near the landing field. He carried a backpack full of mining explosives that Kate had given him. His job was supposed to be simple: plant the explosives and get out. But Peter saw an opportunity. The walker was moving slowly, scanning for targets. Peter ran out from his hiding place and jumped onto one of the machine's legs. The Krolix operator inside didn't notice the small human clinging to the outside of his vehicle. Peter climbed up the walker's leg, using his knowledge of machinery to find weak points. In the armor, at the joint where the leg connected to the main body, he found what he was looking for: a small access panel that led to the walker's power systems. The young man pulled out his tools and began working on the panel. His hands were steady despite the fear in his heart. He could hear the Krolix inside the machine talking to each other, planning their attack on his home. Peter attached the mining explosives to the walker's power core. The timer was set for 30 seconds. That should be enough time for him to get clear. If he was fast enough, he jumped down from the walker and ran toward the nearest building. 20 seconds. The Krolix still hadn't noticed him. 15 seconds. Peter dove behind a concrete barrier. 10 seconds. The walker was turning its main gun toward the school where some of the colonists were hiding. The explosion was massive. The walker's power core overloaded, sending energy through every system in the machine. The 30-foot war machine toppled over like a felled tree, crushing 2 smaller Krolix vehicles beneath it. Zeekmer couldn't believe what he was seeing. One small human had destroyed his most powerful weapon. The prey was fighting back, and they were winning. The battle continued for 6 more hours. The humans used every advantage they had. They knew the land, they knew each other, and they knew how to work together. The Krolix were stronger individually, but they had never faced an enemy like this. When the sun began to set, Zeekmer made a decision that no Krolix commander had ever made before. He ordered his forces to retreat. His army had lost more than a third of its soldiers to what should have been helpless prey as the alien ships lifted off from New Montana. Don Rodriguez stood in the town square. The buildings were damaged, and some good people had died, but the colony was still free. Around him, the surviving colonists were helping the wounded and beginning repairs. Peter Wong walked up to the sheriff, his clothes torn and dirty from the day's fighting. "Do you think they'll come back?"
Ow.
Dan looked up at the alien ships disappearing into the night sky. "Oh, they'll be back. But next time, They'll know they're not hunting prey anymore. Kate Phillips joined them, carrying a data pad full of information about the Krolyk's weapons and tactics. We learned a lot today, she said, about them and about us. What did we learn about us? Peter asked. Kate smiled. We learned that humans don't give up. We learned that we're stronger together than apart. And we learned that sometimes the best way to deal with bullies is to punch them in the nose. The defeat at New Montana sent shockwaves through the Krolyk's empire. For the first time in 3,000 years, their soldiers had retreated from prey animals. Supreme Hunter Vextel paced back and forth in his command chamber, his claws scraping against the metal floor with each step. Explain to me, Vextel growled at Warpack Alpha Zikmer, how you lost a third of your force to soft-skinned weaklings. Zikmer's head hung low in shame. His scales were still blackened from the explosions on New Montana. They fought differently than expected, Supreme Hunter. They used tactics we have never seen. They knew their territory and used it against us. They are prey, Vexel roared. Prey does not fight back. Prey runs or dies. But even as he spoke, Vextel knew something had changed. The humans were not behaving like any species the Krolyks had encountered before. They were not running away or begging for mercy. They were preparing for war. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Tony Chen stood in the command center of the Global Defense Force. The room was filled with screens showing star maps, ship movements, and battle plans. Tony was a calm man with gray hair and steady hands. He'd spent his life in the military, but he had never faced anything like this. Report, Tony said to his staff. Colonel Nina Davis, the intelligence chief, stepped forward. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped analyzing information. The Krolyks are regrouping. Our long-range sensors show massive fleet movements in their home system. They're preparing for a much larger attack. Tony nodded. How much time do we have? Maybe 6 months? Maybe less. Dr. Helen Carter entered the room carrying a stack of data pads. She had been working without sleep for days, studying everything they had learned about the Krolyks. I have news. Good news and bad news? Give me the bad news first, Tony said. Bad news is that they're going to bring everything they have. The attack on New Montana was just a test. The real invasion will involve hundreds of ships and millions of soldiers. Tony felt his heart sink. And the good news? Dr. Carter smiled. The good news is that we've learned their weakness. They're predictable. They've used the same tactics for centuries because they've never needed to change. They're like a lion that's never had to hunt anything but sheep. General Steve Parker walked into the room. He was a big man with a booming voice and hands that looked like they could crush rocks. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying that we can beat them, not with strength, but with intelligence. We need to think like humans, not like Krolyks. Tony turned to look at the main screen, which showed a map of human space. Hundreds of worlds were marked in blue, each one home to millions of people. What do you need? Dr. Carter pulled up a holographic display. First, we need to understand their biology better. Sally Martinez in communications has been working on something interesting. Sally Martinez was a young woman with curly hair and a gift for understanding alien languages. She had spent months studying the Krolyks' transmissions captured during the New Montana battle. I figured out how they communicate during combat, she said. They use chemical signals like pheromones to coordinate their attacks. It's built into their biology, so General Parker asked. So we can jam it? Sally replied. If we can disrupt their chemical communication, they'll be fighting blind. Their pack tactics will fall apart. Dr. Carter nodded. That's just the beginning. We've also learned that their society is based on a strict hierarchy. They follow the strongest leader without question. If we can create confusion in their command structure, they won't know what to do. Tony looked at his team. These were some of the smartest people humanity had ever produced, and they were all focused on one goal: survival. What else do we need? Marcus Lee, the chief engineer, stepped forward. He was a small man with quick hands and a mind that never stopped inventing. We need to turn our civilian ships into weapons. We don't have enough military vessels to fight a full-scale war. How long will that take? Tony asked. If we work around the clock, we can retrofit 1,000 ships in 6 months. They won't be pretty, but they'll fight. Dr. Frank Miller, the weapons specialist, joined the conversation. He was an older man with white hair and eyes that had seen too much war. I've been developing new weapons based on what we learned about Krolyk's armor. Their scales are strong against energy weapons, but they're vulnerable to certain types of projectiles. What kind of projectiles? General Parker asked. Explosive tipped rounds that burrow through their scales before detonating. We can manufacture them from materials we already have. Tony felt hope growing in his chest. Keep talking. Dr. Carter pulled up another display. The most important thing is that we can't fight them the way they expect. They're used to facing enemies who try to match their strength. We need to be smarter, faster, and more unpredictable. Sally Martinez raised her hand. I have an idea about that. What if we don't just jam their communications? What if we feed them false information? Make them think we're weaker than we are? Or that we're in places where we're not? Nina Davis smiled. Deception. I like it. We can make them think Earth is lightly defended while we prepare our real defenses elsewhere. Tony looked around the room at his team. Each person represented a different aspect of human innovation. We're taking their species' greatest strengths and turning them into weapons. What about our allies? Do we have any? Dr. Carter shook her head. The other species in this part of the galaxy are either enslaved by the Kroaks or too afraid to help. We're on our own. Good, General Parker said. That's how humans fight best anyway. Over the next few months, human space became a hive of activity. On every world, factories that had once made consumer goods were now producing weapons and armor. Ships that had carried cargo between planets were being fitted with guns and shields. Civilians were learning to fight, and soldiers were learning new tactics. On the mining world of Kepler-4, workers were extracting rare metals needed for the new weapons. On the agricultural world of Haven, farmers were growing food to feed the growing military. On the industrial world of New Detroit, engineers were working day and night to build ships that could stand against the Krolyk's fleet. Dr. Miller's weapon factories were producing thousands of the new explosive rounds every day. The projectiles were small and simple, but they were designed to exploit the one weakness in Krolyk's armor that the aliens didn't know they had. Sally Martinez had established a network of communication. Jammers throughout human space. When activated, they would flood Krolyk's frequencies with false pheromone signals. Turning their greatest tactical advantage into chaos, Marcus Lee's engineering teams had transformed 1,000 civilian ships into fighting vessels. They didn't look like traditional warships, but they were fast, maneuverable, packed with weapons designed specifically to fight Krolyk's. Nina Davis had created an intelligence network that monitored every Krolyk's movement. Her agents were gathering information about enemy fleet positions, supply lines, and command structures. More importantly, they were feeding false information back to the Krolyk's, making them think humans were weaker and more divided than they actually were. Dr. Carter had established training centers where humans learned to fight as a unified force. Unlike the Krolyk's, who relied on individual strength and pack instincts, humans were learning to coordinate their actions across entire fleets and planetary systems. The breakthrough came when Sally Martinez decoded a high-level Krolyk's transmission. They're planning to attack Earth directly, she announced to the command staff. They think it's our weakest point. Tony Chen smiled. Perfect. Let them come to us. Sir, General Parker looked confused. Don't you see? They're doing exactly what we want them to do. They're concentrating their forces for one massive attack. And they're bringing that attack to our strongest defensive position. Dr. Carter nodded. We've been preparing for this. Earth isn't our weakest point anymore. It's our trap. Tony looked at the holographic display showing Earth's defenses. Hidden weapon platforms surrounded the planet like a deadly web. The converted civilian ships were positioned to look like desperate, last-ditch defenses, but they were actually the first part of a carefully planned counterattack. How long before they get here? Tony asked. 2 weeks, Nina Davis replied. Tony turned to his team. Then we have 2 weeks to finish our preparations. In 2 weeks, the Krolix are going to learn something about humans that they never expected. What's that? Marcus Lee asked. They're going to learn that the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest claws or the strongest bite. It's the one that can think, adapt, and work together. General Parker grinned. Are you ready for this, Admiral? Tony Chen looked at his team, then at the display showing Earth surrounded by its hidden defenses. For the first time since the crisis began, he felt confident. General, I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Outside the command center, the sun was setting over the mountains. In 2 weeks, those mountains would witness the greatest battle in human history. Krolix thought they were coming to crush the last desperate resistance of a prey species. Instead, they were flying directly into the teeth of a trap that had been designed by the most ingenious predators, the galaxy. Had ever seen the hunters were about to become the hunted, and they had no idea what was waiting for them. The Krolix Armada emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. 500 ships stretched across the darkness, their purple lights casting an eerie glow against the stars. At the center of the fleet, Supreme Hunter Vextal stood. On the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fang. The massive ship was 2 miles long and bristled with weapons that could crack planets. There it is, Vextal said, looking at the blue-green world hanging in space before them. The human home world. Today, we end this annoyance forever. Behind him, his warpack leaders studied the tactical displays. The human fleet looked pathetic. Compared to the Krolix Armada, it'd be 200 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels. They were arranged in a desperate defensive formation around Earth, like sheep huddling together while wolves circled them, Supreme Hunter reported. One of the tactical officers, the human fleet, is broadcasting a message. Let me hear it, Vextal commanded. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and steady. It belonged to Fleet Admiral Tony Chen, speaking from the bridge of the converted freighter Liberty Bell. Krolix Fleet, this is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You are not welcome in this system. Turn around and leave, or face the consequences. Vextal laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Consequences? From prey animals? Begin the attack? Show them what happens when livestock tries to threaten their betters. The Krolix fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Each ship knew its role in the coming slaughter. The heavy cruisers would break the human defensive line. The assault ships would land troops on Earth. The support vessels would jam human communications and provide covering fire. But something was wrong. The Krolix ships moved closer to Earth. Their communication systems began to malfunction. Chemical signals that allowed them to coordinate their attacks were being disrupted by strange interference. What is happening? Vextal demanded. Unknown interference, Supreme Hunter, replied the communications officer. Our packlink signals are being jammed. On the bridge of the Liberty Bell, Sally Martinez watched her screens with satisfaction. The communication jammers were working perfectly. Krolix fleet was beginning to break apart as individual ships lost contact with their pack leaders. Admiral, she reported to Tony Chen, the jamming is working. They're starting to lose coordination. Tony nodded. Good, signal the fleet. Begin phase 2. What the Krolix didn't know was that the human ships weren't arranged in a desperate defensive formation. They were positioned to create a perfect trap. As the alien fleet moved deeper into the system, they were entering a carefully planned kill zone. Captain Rick Johnson commanded one of the converted civilian ships, a former mining vessel now bristling with the new explosive-tipped weapons. Its crew was made up of miners, engineers, and farmers who had volunteered to defend their world. They weren't professional soldiers, but they knew how to work together.
All ships.
This is Admiral Chen, came the voice over the radio. Execute Thunder Protocol. Show them what humans can do. Rick smiled and turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral? Let's give these bullies a lesson they won't forget. The human fleet suddenly exploded into action. Ships that had seemed weak and helpless revealed hidden weapons. The converted civilian vessels moved with speed and precision that caught the Krolix completely off guard. Dr. Miller's explosive rounds tore through Krolik's armor like paper. The aliens had never faced weapons designed specifically to exploit their weaknesses. Ship after ship in the Krolik's fleet found their hulls breached by projectiles that burrowed deep before exploding. But the real surprise came from Grace Thompson, a young pilot flying a small interceptor called the Shooting Star. Grace had been a racing pilot before the war, known for her ability to fly through asteroid fields at impossible speeds. Now she was using those skills to dart between the massive Krolik ships, targeting their most vulnerable points. "This is Thompson," she reported over the radio. "I'm making a run on their flagship." "Thompson negative," Admiral Chen replied. "That ship is too heavily defended." "With respect, Admiral, I didn't ask for permission." Grace pushed her small ship to maximum speed, weaving between the energy beams that filled the space around the Krolik's flagship. Her interceptor was tiny compared to the massive alien vessel. But that was exactly what she was counting on. The Krolik's point defense systems were designed to stop large targets. They had trouble tracking something as small and fast as Grace's ship. She slipped through their defenses like a needle through cloth. On the bridge of the Eternal Fang, Vextel watched in disbelief as the small human ship approached his vessel. "Destroy that insect," he roared. But it was too late. Grace had reached the flagship's most vulnerable spot, the point where the ship's main reactor connected to its primary weapon systems. She fired a single shot from her ship's main gun, weapon loaded with Dr. Miller's most powerful explosive round. The projectile punched through the flagship's armor and detonated inside the reactor housing. The explosion sent shockwaves through the entire ship, knocking Vexel to his knees and causing systems to fail throughout the vessel. "Impossible," Vexel whispered. "One small ship cannot damage the Eternal Fang." But the damage was real. The flagship's main weapons were offline, and several secondary systems were failing. Around the fleet, other Krolik ships were suffering similar damage from the coordinated human attack. The aliens tried to regroup, but their communication problems made coordination impossible. Without their pack-link signals, individual Kroliks commanders began making their own decisions, often contradicting each other. Captain Johnson's mining ship, the Iron Will, found itself facing 3 Krolik's cruisers. In a straight fight, the converted civilian vessel would have been destroyed in seconds. But Johnson's crew had learned to fight like humans, not like Kroliks. To deploy the mining charges, Johnson ordered. The Iron Will released dozens of small devices that looked like harmless debris. The Krolik's cruisers ignored them, focusing on the larger target. That was a mistake. The mining charges were programmed to seek out the specific metal alloys used in Krolik ship construction. They attached themselves to the enemy vessels like mechanical parasites, then exploded simultaneously. The 3 cruisers were crippled in an instant. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships that looked outmatched were using intelligence and teamwork to defeat larger, more powerful opponents. The Kroliks, used to relying on individual strength, had no answer for coordinated human tactics. On Earth, Dr. Carter watched the battle from the orbital command center. The data streaming in from the fight was beyond her best expectations. The humans weren't just winning, they were dominating. "Admiral," she reported to Tony Chen, "their fleet is breaking apart. They're losing coordination and starting to panic." Tony nodded grimly. "Good. Signal all ships. Begin Phase 3. Phase 3 was the most dangerous part of the plan. Instead of continuing the defensive fight, the human fleet would go on the offensive. They would pursue the retreating Krolik ships and try to capture their flagship. Vextel stood on his damaged bridge, watching his fleet fall apart around him. Ships that had dominated the galaxy for millennia were being destroyed by converted cargo haulers and mining vessels. His warpack leaders were calling for retreat, their voices filled with something he had never heard before. "Fear." "Supreme Hunter," reported his tactical officer. "We've lost 200 ships. The humans are pushing forward. They're trying to surround us." Vextel felt something cold growing in his chest. For the first time in his life, he was experiencing what his prey had always felt. He was afraid. "All ships," he commanded, his voice shaking, "fall back to the outer system. We'll regroup and his words were cut off as another explosion rocked the flagship. Grace Thompson had made another pass, this time targeting the ship's communication array. The Eternal Fang was now cut off from the rest of the fleet. "Sir," reported the navigation officer, "multiple human ships are moving to intercept us. Either trying to capture the flagship." Vexthal looked at the tactical display. The humans weren't just fighting defensively anymore. They were hunting. They were using the same tactics that the Krolix had used on countless other species. "No," he whispered, "we are the hunters. We are the apex predators." But even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't true anymore. The humans had turned the tables completely. They'd become the predators, and the Krolix had become the prey. The battle continued for 6 more hours. At the end, the Krolix fleet was scattered and broken. Over half their ships were destroyed or captured. The survivors fled into hyperspace, carrying with them the shocking news that the mighty Krolix Empire had been defeated by soft-skinned prey animals. On the bridge of the Liberty Bell, Admiral Chen watched the last Krolix ships disappear into hyperspace. Around him, his crew was celebrating their victory, but Tony felt no joy. This was just the beginning. "All ships," he announced, "prepare for pursuit." "We're going to follow them home?" His officers looked at him in surprise. "Sir?" asked Captain Johnson. "The Krolix Empire has been the bully of this galaxy for 3,000 years, Tony replied. "It's time someone taught them what it feels like to be afraid." Grace Thompson's voice came over the radio from her interceptor. "Admiral, are you saying we're taking the fight to them?" 6 months after the battle at Earth, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Krolix home system. Admiral Jake Morrison, now promoted to fleet commander, stood on the bridge of the flagship Endeavor and looked at the massive, slow, red star that had warmed the Krolix homeworld for millions of years. The human fleet had grown during the journey. Ships from every human colony had joined the expedition. Miners, farmers, engineers, and teachers had all volunteered to help finish what the Krolix had started. The fleet now numbered over 1,000 vessels, each one crewed by people who had lost friends and family to alien aggression. "Signal from the advanced scouts," reported Communications Officer Sally Martinez. "The Krolix home system has massive defenses. Orbital weapons platforms, automated defense drones, and a fleet of over 2,000 ships." Jake nodded calmly. "Any response to our arrival?" "Yes, sir. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. The message is simple: surrender or be destroyed." Dick smiled. "Send them our response." The message went out across the Krolix system on every communication channel. Jake's voice was steady and clear as he spoke words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "Krolix Empire, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Corps. You came to our world seeking prey. You found predators. Attacked our families. Now we're here to end your reign of terror. Surrender now or face the consequences." On the bridge of the Krolix command station orbiting their homeworld, Supreme Hunter Vexthal listened to the human message with growing rage. His once mighty empire was crumbling around him. After the defeated Earth, dozens of species that had been enslaved by the Krolix had risen in rebellion. The empire that had lasted 3,000 years was falling apart. "How dare they?" roared. "Soft-skinned weaklings, threatening us in our own system. We will crush them completely." But even as he spoke, Vexthal felt fear growing in his chest. The humans had already done the impossible once. They had defeated the greatest Krolix fleet ever assembled. Could they do it again? Supreme Hunter reported as tactical officer, "Our fleet is ready, but our commanders are requesting permission to negotiate." Vexthal's claws scraped against the metal floor. Negotiate? With prey animals. Never. The battle began with the Krolix making the same mistake they had made at Earth. They charged forward in massive formations, relying on overwhelming force and individual strength. But the humans had learned even more in the months since their victory. Captain Grace Thompson, now commanding a squadron of fast attack ships, led the first wave of the human assault. Her ships moved like a school of fish, coordinating their movements perfectly while the Krolix struggled to track so many small, fast targets. "This is Thompson," she reported over the radio. Beginning attack run on their orbital platforms, Grace's squadron dived toward the massive weapons platforms that guarded the Krolyk's homeworld. The platforms were armed with cannons that could destroy capital ships. But they were too slow to track the human fighters. Dr. Miller's new weapons had been improved even more since the battle at Earth. The explosive rounds now carried computer guidance systems that could seek out weak points. In enemy armor, Grace's ships fired volleys of these smart projectiles. Watching as they burrowed through the platform's defenses before exploding, one by one, the orbital platforms fell silent. The Krolyks had built their defenses to stop large fleets using traditional tactics. They had no answer for the creative, adaptive strategies that humans employed. Meanwhile, Captain Rick Johnson led a group of converted civilian ships in a direct assault on the Krolyk's fleet. His miners and engineers had spent months modifying their vessels, turning cargo holds into weapon bays and navigation systems into targeting computers. Remember, Johnson told his crews, "We're not trying to match them strength for strength. We're smarter than they are. Use it." The human civilian ships scattered across the battlefield, each one following a different tactical plan. Some released clouds of metal chaff that confused Krolyk sensors. Others fired nets of energy that tangled enemy ships together. A few even used their industrial equipment as weapons, shooting streams of molten metal at alien vessels. The Krolyk's fleet, expecting a traditional battle, found themselves fighting dozens of different tactics at once. Every time they adapted to one human strategy, the humans switched to something completely different. On the surface of the Krolyk's homeworld, Dr. Helen Carter was monitoring the battle from her position aboard a stealth ship. She had been studying Krolyk psychology for months, and she understood something that even the aliens didn't know about themselves. "Admiral," she reported to Jake Morrison, "they're breaking. Their entire social structure is based on the idea that they're unbeatable. And that falls apart. They don't know what to do." Jake could see it happening across the battlefield. Individual Krolyk ships were beginning to flee instead of fighting. Others were surrendering without firing a shot. The mighty empire was collapsing, not just militarily, but psychologically. "All ships," Jake announced, "move to surround their command station. We're going to end this." The human fleet converged on the massive space station where Supreme Hunter Vextel had made his last stand. The station was heavily armed and protected by the last loyal Krolyk ships. But it was clear that the battle was already over. Vextel stood in his command chamber, watching his empire die around him. His advisors were begging him to surrender. But he couldn't accept what was happening. For 3,000 years, the Krolyks had been the apex predators of the galaxy. How could they be defeated by creatures that looked so weak? Supreme Hunter reported his communications officer, "The humans are requesting our surrender. They say they will spare our lives if we agree to their terms." Vexel laughed bitterly. "Spare our lives? You're Krolyks. We do not beg for mercy." From prey. But even as he spoke, he knew that everything had changed. The humans weren't prey anymore. They had become something far more dangerous than any apex predator. They had become teachers, showing the galaxy that strength came not from claws and fangs, but from intelligence and cooperation. The final assault on the command station lasted only 30 minutes. The humans used every advantage they had gained during months of fighting. They jammed Krolyk's communications, exploited weaknesses in their technology, and coordinated their attacks with perfect precision. When the station's defenses finally failed, human Marines, led by Sergeant Peter Wong, boarded the facility. Peter had grown from a young colonist into a skilled soldier, but he still carried the same determination that had driven him to destroy the Krolyk's walker on New Montana. "This is Sergeant Wong," he reported as his team moved through the station. "Corridors, we've reached the command center. Supreme Hunter is requesting terms for surrender." Jake Morrison's voice came back over the radio. "Tell him the terms are simple. Complete surrender of all Krolyk's forces, immediate release of all enslaved species, and acceptance of human oversight of their government." Peter found Vextel in the command chamber, surrounded by his remaining advisors. The once mighty Supreme Hunter looked old and defeated. His scales had lost their shine, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone whose entire world had been turned upside down. Supreme Hunter Vextel, Peter said formally, I am here to accept your surrender on behalf of the Terran Defense Corps.
Vextel
Looked at the young human soldier. You are the one who destroyed our walker on the farming world? Yes, Peter replied simply. How? Vextel asked. How did prey animals defeat the greatest predators in the galaxy? Peter thought for a moment before answering. Because we were never prey. We were just a different kind of predator. One that you didn't understand. The surrender ceremony took place on the bridge of the Endeavor. Representatives from dozens of species that had been enslaved by the Krolix watched as Vextel formally handed over control of his empire to the humans. Admiral Jake Morrison accepted the surrender with dignity. The Krolix Empire is ended, he announced. But the Krolix people will not be destroyed. They will be given a chance to learn a different way of living. Dr. Carter stepped forward. We're not here to become the new bullies of the galaxy. We're here to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. In the months that followed, the human fleet helped establish new governments on worlds that had been enslaved for centuries. The Krolix were not exterminated or enslaved in turn. Instead, they were taught to live peacefully alongside other species. Some Krolix like Warpack Alpha Zikmar chose to join the new galactic peacekeeping force that the humans established. Others returned to their homeworld to rebuild their society without the violence that had defined them for so long. The galaxy had learned a new truth. The real apex predators weren't the ones with the biggest claws or the strongest bite. Were the ones who could adapt, learn, and protect the innocent. They were the ones who chose to be teachers instead of tyrants. 1 year after the fall of the Krolix Empire, Admiral Jake Morrison stood before the newly formed Galactic Council. Representatives from hundreds of species had come to hear humanity's vision for the future. We didn't ask to become the protectors of the galaxy, Jake said, but we accept the responsibility